Wait, Hold Up What? A podcast from the women behind Eliminate Girl Hate. Stories are the foundation of progress, and for too long, the voices of women and marginalized communities have been ignored or silenced. At Wait, Hold Up What? We're reclaiming space to share the struggles, triumphs, fears, and joy that shapes our lives. Join us as we explore the intersections of identity, equity, and empowerment, offering education, support, and a little inspiration along the way. Whether it's breaking barriers, celebrating wins, or tackling the tough stuff, this is a space for everyone to feel seen, heard, and uplifted. We invite you all to join the conversation and help us explore ways to eliminate girl hate together. Can a bra help change the trajectory of a girl's life? Did you know that nationally, only 20% of girls engage in at least 60 minutes of daily physical activity, a lower rate than boys? Or that girls' participation in sports drops off significantly from the ages of 10 to 17? Wait, hold up, what? Yeah. Some of the barriers that contribute to this include lack of financial means, lack of role models, dropping body confidence, and concerns about body changes, including breast development and the need for a sports bra. The simple intervention of a sports bra, along with the normalization of body development, can change the trajectory of a girl's relationship with body movement for her whole life. You heard that right, her whole life. Every girl deserves to feel comfortable and confident in her own body. And that's why Bras for Girls partners with more than 25 athletic brands and donors just like you to distribute new, high-quality sports bras and breast development booklets to girls in need, ranging from the age of 8 to 18. Let's get girls in well-fitting sports bras right when they need them the most. Girls plus sports equals a beautiful world. You can donate to Bras for Girls today at brasforgirls.org. And as a side note, Eliminate Girl Hate has partnered with brasforgirls.org and will be donating a proceed of all merchandise sales to helping girls get in the bras that they need and keep them in sports. You can help by shopping the Eliminate Girl Hate store today. How many times have you heard the words workplace and culture used together and found yourself rolling your eyes at the thought? Believe me, I'm with you. I'll be honest, as I record this, I just rolled my eyes. That's because the word culture has become homogenized in such a way that they actually had us believing ping pong tables and pizza were symbolic of a good place to work. COVID changed that. Remote work was a success in the eyes of many, and as such, our ideas of what constitutes a good workplace culture have changed, and it boils down to one crucial element: equity. Now, don't you roll your eyes again on me. It's true. The expectation of employees is that they have a work environment and culture that works for them, regardless of who they are. No more cookie cutter swag and Pizza Hut deliveries, mandatory after hours, happy hours, and all of the other things they do to make us feel like we're a family. This is especially true for women. Remote work gave many more hours in the day, the flexibility to feel more productive and present, and a choice in how and what style of work is best for who they are and what they do. This is at the core of what equity means, because the old way was made for one group of people. And this is where Eliminate Girl Hate comes in. We help create safe and equitable spaces for girls and women, and we help the companies that employ them be more profitable in the process. Not rolling your eyes anymore, are you? Check us out at eliminategirlhate.com. Use code WAITHOLDUPWHAT in your contact form for a free consultation call and see how we can help you and your business. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wait, Hold Up What? I am your host, Dawne, as always. And today I'm excited because my guest here, and I forgot to ask you how you pronounce your last name.
Kocher.
Kocher. Okay. I was going to say Kocher. So Evelyn Kocher, who I met recently at a campaign launch party for the Equal Rights for All in Oregon bill. And I was very struck by the talk that you gave, speech that you gave. I don't really know what they considered. And I thought, what a great person to have on the show. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. And
One of the most interesting things that I thought about you, I'm sure a lot of people will say this, is that you speak 10 languages.
Yes.
So my first easy softball question is, are you a language person? Like, do you love language, or is it just kind of part of how you grew up?
It's a little bit of both. Okay. I grew up speaking both English and Indonesian, and I was a little bit ashamed growing up of not being able to speak Indonesian as well as I thought I should have, as a lot of people are with their heritage language. So I really made an effort to get better at Indonesian during my teenage years when we went back to visit family in Indonesia. And then after I graduated high school, my family has a tradition of going on foreign exchange. And I just started picking up languages from there. I spent most of my 20s traveling. And
that's so late to learn languages.
I just ended up really liking being able to connect with people, especially in their own language. It's like a switch flip. If you talk to them in English, you could communicate with them. But if you showed them that you knew their language, it was a whole new world of possibilities.
I always felt that way in France. Every time I went to France, like people would warn me, the French don't like Americans. French don't like Americans. I was like, that's not my experience. And it was because I'm horrible at languages. I can pick up with an ear sometimes, depending on the language, like a lot of Tagalog, Spanish. I was able to really pick up even some Italian, but my tongue I can't roll my R's. I can't like form certain things, but I always tried.
It's hard.
Yeah, at least the basics, right? Can I say thank you? Can I say receipt? Can I say hello? How are you? Things like that. And I always found that people then responded so much better to me, and I had such a great experience. So
Absolutely.
I totally get that.
So when I did my exchange year, it was a gap year after high school. I went to Paraguay and I lived in Ciudad del Este, which is a border region. And I ended up learning 3 different languages during my time there. I learned Spanish, I learned Portuguese because it was on the Brazilian
border.
Yeah. And I learned Guarani, which is the indigenous language that is spoken in most of Paraguay. And from there, I'm like, this is really cool. And there are so many languages that are spoken here because it's such an international area. And so when I went to college, I decided to study cultural and linguistic anthropology. And it kind of
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. And what part of Indonesia are you from?
Just the capital. My family is truly Indonesian, we're a mix of all of the different ethnicities across Indonesia, kind of what people like to view as like the Indonesian utopian ideal, and not like not from one specific area or another, but kind of a mix of everything. And arguably is truly Indonesian, spoke Indonesian at home, lived in the capital.
What is the capital?
Jakarta.
I've been in Indonesia, but like in such a white girl way, I went to Bali.
Yeah.
But in my defense, I technically didn't choose Bali. It was a work trip, and I decided to tack on more of it. My sister came and met me out there, and we stayed a lot longer than most of my trips. Like I might add a day or two, but I think we stayed like an extra 9-10 days or something like that.
To be fair, Bali is absolutely stunningly beautiful.
It is. So. But it also, what I'm glad we did is we went to a variety of areas. So we didn't just get what's on Instagram and TikTok. We were able to see different parts. Early in my career, I asked people that traveled, like, what are the lessons for me when I travel? What should I focus on? What should I concentrate on? And one of the things that I was told is try to eat a meal in someone's home, because you really get the sense of family. And so I was able to do that there. Other places that I've traveled as well. And it feels like such a blessing because you learn so much more about the culture when you're in someone's home.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Bali is a really amazing place. We've gone there a couple times with my family's gone there when we're visiting Indonesia just because it's really close and cheap. Why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And Bali is a really unique place. It's one of the only places outside of the Indian subcontinent that's majority Hindu. And that's one of the reasons why it was kind of pushed as a big tourist destination, is because, first of all, it's gorgeous, but it's not necessarily any more gorgeous than any other part of Indonesia. It's just a little bit more Western friendly because you can have bars around that serve alcohol, that serve pork. And so it's a little bit more accessible than the rest of majority Muslim Indonesia.
Yeah. But it was interesting. There was an undertow, in Nusa Dua, I did not feel this way, but in Ubud, it didn't feel like drinking was the thing, or, you know what I mean? there was less of this, like that kind of tourism there for us. I felt like it was more coffee and a crispy duck. Like we're right.
I mean, Ubud is kind of the center of Chinese culture in Bali,
Mhm.
if I remember correctly. But also, like the culture of Indonesia as a whole has been really influenced by Islam.
Mhm.
And so, even when you're in a majority Hindu area like Bali, that sort of national culture is still going to be a little bit more pervasive, even
Yeah.
if it isn't the dominant local culture.
Yeah, I did. I saw a healer, a local healer who only saw one tourist like a quarter or something like that. And I'd done all this research on him and went and there were some rules about being in that home. And I went into their, I'm blanking on the name, where they basically worship in their home. I'm literally having brain fog right now. And there are rules to go in there, especially as a woman, right? And you can't be on your period and you can't. So my sister was with me and they were like, no, you can't come in here. And we didn't tell them that. They just knew. And so it's very interesting to see that kind of different culture and understand how they go about healing and how they go about different gender stereotypes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what that was a total kind of left turn.
We talked about language and culture. I could be here all day.
I wondered, and I think I love to travel. I love to travel in very different ways and different things. I don't like to go to cities. I like to go to smaller towns and different things like that. And part of that is understanding the similarities between us. And I imagine that when language also becomes part of that travel, those similarities are even more striking because you are speaking in their language and there's a comfort level that comes with that. And I think that's important for the conversation that we have today is this idea of, we wanted to talk about the similarities or the proximity between cis and trans women. And this idea that culturally we keep trying to put them into different buckets. And that's not really the reality of it. And if we could find common language, then maybe that would disintegrate. And we wouldn't see this as an us versus them or I hate to say this, but a lot of people see it as a threat. And I think that is strange. And so, yeah.
It's the same reason that people are always initially skeptical of civil rights. They think that more rights for one group of people means less rights for themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's like people always say, civil rights aren't pie. More for me doesn't mean less for you. Yeah. More for you doesn't mean less for me.
And we've proven that time and time again. I, for the listener, I apologize if this is super repetitive, but I consistently am shocked about this concept of, there's a lot of people that talk about a growth mindset, but then so much of us talk about a scarcity model, right? And this idea that there isn't enough to go on, but 20, 30, 50, 60 years ago, we could not imagine how many billionaires are in the world. And we're about to see our first trillionaire. And that wasn't imaginable. So the world told us that we are in this scarcity and that can't happen. And we said, guess what? It can. So why isn't that same thing or that same opportunity afforded when it comes to people and their rights? It just seems backwards a little bit.
It really does. And I think that it all comes from fundamentally people being scared of what they don't know, right? And, in the US, probably 100 years ago, what they didn't know was non-whiteness was scary. And then into the 70s, 80s, and 90s during the AIDS crisis, then it was homosexuality that was scary. And it's always the same playbook. It's always the same fears that are propagated because it's easy to let your fear take over. It's easy to let that part of your brain take over and the unknown, let the unknown scare you a little bit. But it's all the same playbook. It's just a different group of people every time. And it's just about getting people to realize that people are people and we have more in common than we do that separates us. I remember seeing polls back in the day of the big fight for marriage equality. And by far the biggest factor that would influence somebody's opinion on marriage equality was not party affiliation, was not living in a city versus living in a rural area, was not income or race or gender. It was if the person knew a gay person. That was it. It was having somebody in their life that humanized the issue.
And it's so interesting because, of course, I get it. Any civil rights that have been fought for, it wasn't until people saw it for themselves and could empathize or internalize it because there was some sort of proximity to it that change happens. Okay, sure, I get it. We hear a lot of times when we talk about feminism, what if it was your daughter or your mother or your sister? But I'm so confused as to why we don't care about people unless we know them.
It's the same philosophy behind zoos. They have found that psychologically, even though a person can care about conservation, can care about animals, they will subconsciously care more about animals if they can go see them for themselves. And that's a big argument for the maintaining the existence of zoos. If zoos continue to work towards conservation of these species and continue to provide homes for animals that aren't able to be released from the wild or are rescued from the wild, then it's a big argument towards the continual existence of these zoos, because it gives people an opportunity to experience these animal species for themselves and to care a little bit more about them because it's put in front of their faces. And it's just human nature to care a little bit more about things that are a little more familiar or that are made more familiar. And that's the issue here when we were fighting for racial equality, or when we still are fighting for racial equality. Most of America interacts with people of different races on a regular basis. We're fighting for gender equality. Most people interact with people of a different gender on a regular basis. Even when the fight for marriage equality, gay people or people anywhere on the LGBTQ plus spectrum make up about 10% of Americans, but trans people make up less than 1%.
That we know of?
That we know of.
Okay.
And also, some of those folks might not want to be public. Some of them might still be closeted. Some of them might be what is called stealth in the trans community, or are at a point in their transition where they can pass entirely as cis and not tell people that they're trans unless they so choose.
So let me stop you right there. I think for the point of edification, terms like cis and trans are somewhat new in the cultural dialogue. So how would you define cis and how would you define trans?
Yeah, that's a great question. Cis is a Latin term that means on the same side of. It literally just means cisgender is the full term, and it means somebody who identifies with the same gender that they were assigned at birth.
Okay.
And trans or transgender means somebody who doesn't identify with the same gender that they were assigned at birth, that they were observed to have at birth by a doctor looking at the person's genitals. This means that trans is kind of an umbrella term. It covers a lot of people, whether they are identify as what we think of as binary trans, like as in somebody who was assigned male at birth and now identifies as female, or it can identify people who are genderqueer, people who are non-binary, a lot of different folks.
Okay.
And this use of the word trans is also from Latin. It's pretty common in our language. We have transportation, taking something from one place to another. We have transfers. We have transparent. There are lots of ways that we use this. And to talk about moving from one place to another, from one thing to another. And in this case, it's just talking about somebody's experience of gender. People, like a doctor, originally thought that this person was one gender, and their experience of themselves and of life and of the roles that they wanted to play in society was so different from what is traditionally known to be associated with that gender that they wanted to escape that and move to another one that fit them better.
And I'm trying to think of all the questions that stop people in their tracks, right? That convince them this is other and so I can't. And so some of the things that I think are interesting is, for some reason, when we age, the terminology can't teach an old dog new tricks. I feel like that is what happens when people age. So older people, they get stuck in their ways, they become less flexible. And part of that is this like concept of wisdom. Like, I know because I've lived life and you don't know, you're young, you don't know what you're talking about. But part of it is this weird inflexibility for progress. And so you see that most movements happen from young people, right? Because they've got so much life to live that they're like, no, I'm not going to continue in this way that doesn't work for me. Why do you think it's so scary just because you don't know it?
Well, I could tell you about all of the scientific reasons behind why trans people are the way they are and how they work towards being in a different societal role and a different gender, but ultimately that won't end up changing people's minds because people are a lot of the times very set in their ways.
Yeah.
What ultimately is the main reason why new social justice and civil rights movements scare people is because they change things that people have taken for granted to always stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
If you inherently know that this is how things are and that is not going to change, and suddenly a new group of people, especially younger people, are questioning that this thing can actually change at all, you might not oppose it because you're actually opposed to it. You might oppose it just because questioning the fact that this thing can change at all as opposed to being immutable is scary.
And probably also like, I wish I knew the way to phrase this, but like you look at yourself and you say, why didn't I have the strength to fight for something more? Or why didn't I know we could do this? Or we heard this a lot with the student loan forgiveness. Well, I had to pay mine. Why should you have an easier road? Well, and yet when you're a parent, you're like, I want my kids to have an easier road. You're like, if I can pay for why not let the government pay for it? Like, it's interesting.
I think the whole point of this is that, I don't want the next generation to have to suffer in the same way I did.
Mm-hmm.
I don't because I had and the people who came before me, they suffered in a completely different way that I can't even begin to understand.
Yeah.
And I know that they wanted things to be better for me, and I want things to be better for the people who come after me. Yeah. And I don't want people to say I had to suffer this way, so you have to too.
Mm-hmm.
I want things to be better for them, and I want them to not know what I'm going through now, how I'm having to deal with it, because I want the world to be better for them.
Yeah. And it does take a stop and pause, right? Like even, when you work in a corporate environment and you see young kids coming up and demanding things that you were like, ooh, I would not have been able to do that. That wasn't allowed when I was working, right?
Like the big thing now is paid parental leave.
Yeah. And you're like, if you fought it, and this is all progress, right? We make it look shiny and fancy on TV and movies. And it's such a beautiful experience. It's hard to be in those trenches. It is hard to change hearts and minds. And the people that do it, while we lift them up and exalt them 20, 30, 50, 100 years later, they had a lot of pain to do that, and a lot of trauma and a lot of things that were ignored, if you will, for them in light of us lifting them up and giving them a stamp, if you will. It's not an easy process.
There's a local author that has historically written fiction, but he just came out with a new book. His name is Omar El Akkad, and I think he actually lives around here on the west side of Portland. And his new book is titled "One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This."
Yes.
And it's really easy to it's about the mass killing of civilians in Palestine, but it's something that can be widely applied to a lot of things. You won't have people proudly talking about their history of fighting against the civil rights movement. You won't have people proudly talking about their cowardice during the AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
The stories that survive are the people who fight for things to get better, not the people who fight for things to stay the same.
So true. And it's such a, when I look at pop culture right now, there's a lot of bad things about social media and there's a lot of bad things about the internet. But one of the blessings it has given us, it is that it has almost democratized the arts in a way that has allowed what would be considered niche content to live and breathe and be successful without having 60 million views. So you mentioned the fight in Palestine, right? The show Mo that is on television right now. I could not say enough wonderful things about this show, right? It is an important piece of art that we will look back on generations from now as being something that humanized the experience. You have something like Nathaniel and the Gerard Carmichael show that is putting a light on LGBT men, right? From traditionally conservative Christian homes, from homes of color that have really struggled to embrace people that have come out and that are living in their truth. You have Brahmi, you have all these different shows that are coming out and letting you see the humanity of these experiences and how similar they are to our own, right? And I think that that's important. And I think people, I say it all the time, people sharing their stories becomes important. So when you go and you speak, because this is obviously something important to you, it's your life and it's your calling, we've talked about, is to prevent other people from experiencing what you did, to have a better go of it. How would you orate, or what would you say your story to get to here is?
Oh gosh, I have a very long story. So my parents met when my dad was an exchange student in Indonesia. My mom is Indonesian, and when I was 3, I was born in Indonesia, grew up until I was 3 in Indonesia. But when I was 3, there was a financial crisis that ended with 7,000% inflation and the overthrow of the Indonesian dictatorship.
Wow.
So we moved to the US because we could. I had citizenship. My dad is a citizen, so we moved back here, where my dad's family is from.
Straight away to Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Ever since I've lived in the US, I've lived in this area my whole life. I grew up in and around Beaverton, and when Beaverton was a very, very different place than it is now, went away to college and kind of buried all of these feelings of inadequacy under academics and travel.
Sorry to interrupt, but did those inadequacies come to play in college, or they'd been there for quite a while?
Been there for quite some time. I was second in my class in college. I got a full ride scholarship to, second in my class in high school, full ride scholarship to college. But ever since I think middle school I had these feelings of something isn't quite right. And no matter what I achieved, there's always this feeling of something not being quite right.
And did some of it also, because I know that is often the feelings of the children of immigrants. I mean, technically you are also an immigrant, but you have immigrant parents trying to raise you as this American child. Mm-hmm. So was some of it that, or did you think it was that? Like, did you know what it was that made you feel inadequate?
I did think it was that. In a lot of my childhood, I went through cycles of trying to connect more with my Indonesian heritage, trying to be a better Muslim when I was younger so that I could feel better about myself and try to figure out what was the reason that I was feeling quite like I didn't fit in, like something wasn't right. And nothing really quite worked. And I was a very good student because I used that to distract myself from these feelings. And it's like, you know what, if I keep achieving these things, then I might, dispel these feelings of something not being quite right.
Were you good at hiding that you felt that way, or did your family also know that you were struggling?
I was very good at hiding this because I hid it under academics, but I made sure that I was as busy as humanly possible. Mm-hmm. I did so many activities. Mm-hmm. I did so many extracurriculars. I did IB diploma. The only indicator that things were slightly off was that all of my friends were girls. I did not have any guy friends at all, which I also thought was weird. But I couldn't connect with guys. They just seemed so emotionally stunted, and I didn't really understand why anybody would want to be friends with people that didn't have that emotional intimacy.
I'm sorry that I'm laughing, but I feel you.
Yeah. And then I spent most of my 20s traveling because when I was busy learning a new language, a new culture, making new friends, I didn't have time to worry about anything else.
And you felt purposeful.
And I felt purposeful. Yeah. Until February of 2020. Wow. I was living in China at the time. let me tell you, not a great time to be living in China.
Right.
And I came back to the US on a almost entirely empty plane,
Mm-hmm.
which is an experience in and of itself. Walking through Beijing airport with 2 flights on the
Wow.
board, I felt like I was in a zombie apocalypse because no one else was there.
Mm-hmm.
It was very creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back and 2020 happened. COVID happened. And I spent the entirety of COVID sitting in my parents' house, getting more and more depressed because I realized that the strategies that I've been using to escape these feelings of something not being quite right couldn't work when I was sitting alone in quarantine. And so I just got more and more depressed as these feelings kind of took over.
Your Band-Aid went away.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't use external validation. I couldn't use academic validation. I couldn't use traveling. I couldn't use keeping myself busy because ultimately I was still just sitting at home.
How old were you around this time?
I was 24.
Okay.
And that was my catalyst, is that, you know what? I realized that during quarantine, I needed to be somebody that I could live with for the rest of my life. And even though I am so incredibly proud of a lot of the things that I had done up to then, there was still something wrong. And there was still something that made me fundamentally unhappy. And that's when I could finally admit to myself that I was trans, because this had been my greatest shame for the entirety of my life, because I had always thought that it was something to be ashamed of. And now, ever since then, everything feels easier, because no matter how bad things get,
you're you.
I'm still me, and I am still ultimately infinitely happier as myself now than I ever was then. And the feeling of something being wrong my entire life, it's like I had an alarm going off in the background my entire life, and I finally found out a way to shut it off, and now there's silence. And I didn't know that that was something you could do, was turn the alarm off. And it's been completely life-changing. And yeah, no, my worst day now is better than my best day then, just because I am finally a version of myself that I want to see what comes next. Before, even when I was academically successful in high school, middle school, high school, college, whatever, people would ask me, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And I couldn't tell them, because I could not imagine a version of myself 5 years in the future, because that would mean that I would have to imagine a version of myself that didn't fit who I felt that I was.
Because you couldn't see the version that was authentic yet.
No.
Like, you couldn't see making it happen.
And I didn't know that was the reason. But I always was like, I don't know. I have no idea. And I just thought that was normal. Nobody knows, right?
Yeah.
And I was obsessed with all these stories of people trying to, like, find themselves, figure out what they wanted to do. And I failed.
Yeah.
So badly. The reason I traveled so much is because I was trying to run away from my future, because I didn't want to imagine a future in which I had to exist in the same way that I was.
So this is where I find this is the catalyst point for me, right? Because everything you just said, very little of that used the word trans, used anything like that. And I'm going to forget the exact wording that you said, but there was a moment in 2020 when you said, I don't want to keep living this if this is not it.
Yeah.
I know so many people, including myself, that had that exact thought in 2020, having nothing to do with my identity as far as gender was concerned, but it was still my identity. And that experience is very common, absolutely. I think, in different ways, right? Not to minimize your experience.
No, absolutely.
But then also the latter part, that was when I started walking in that truth, the noise being turned off.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think, I'm going to gender it, which is weird, but we see it a lot in culture for women, is that the ways in which our brains create noise is very different than the ways in which the brains of boys or men create noise. And it is a constant humming and drumming and mechanisms and ringing. And so this idea that it could go silent sounds like heaven.
It really was. And ultimately, the difference now between the life that I'm living and the life that I was living is that every single day I wake up and am inhabiting a body that is openly displaying what used to be my greatest shame. And that is something that was completely unfathomable before. And so every day I am confronting what used to be the thing that I used to be the most afraid of in the entire world of somebody discovering.
But you're using all of the tools that you mastered on the way to get there to then help other people.
Absolutely. And if I can do that, if I can confront my former greatest shame every single day, I can do anything.
And that's such a human experience.
Yeah.
We all have shame. Whatever it is, it can be trauma-based, and it doesn't have to be trauma-based because people get all weird about the word trauma, right?
But I think people do that in every single way, every single day. You get all these people that try to use their greatest shame to help other people.
Yes.
With the same thing. You get people who use their shame of child abuse, who use their shame of addiction, who use their shame of just an unimaginable amount of different things.
Yeah.
And use that to try to help people who came after them. And I think that that's beautiful and is a symptom of the human condition that a lot of these people use what had been their greatest shame and say, you know what? I am not ashamed of this. I'm choosing to not be ashamed of this. And I'm going to be an example to everyone else so nobody else has to be as ashamed of this as I used to be.
Well, and there's so much work being done. I mean, people talk about Brene Brown a lot, right? But this concept of shame and vulnerability and then empathy, right? Empathy cannot exist without having gone through something and having a trauma that allows you to say, oh, wow, I don't ever want to do that again. Like that is what fosters and feeds empathy. And so when you talk about people who can't come to a place of understanding, like you can give them the scientific information, they're logical people, and logic doesn't convince them.
You can't logic somebody out of a position they didn't logic themselves into.
Yeah.
So much of it is controlled by feeling. And if they feel that this is something that is immutable, that's something that is that never changes and that you can't change it no matter how much you try because it just is just the way it is, then there is very little you can do to change somebody's mind. But to me, I think I saw a really great analogy somebody came up with the other day about parenthood. When we call people parents if they have a child, and that is very universal. But there's one group of people who we also call parents that the biological definition of parent does not necessarily apply to, and that's adoptive parents. We have no problem calling those people parents and going up to adoptive parents and saying, well, you know that this isn't really your child. They know that already.
Yeah.
And going up to them and reminding them of that is just kind of being a dick and also kind of doing a disservice to all of the role that they inhabit in the world.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there are people who do all the things that parents do and choose not to call themselves parents. If an aunt or grandparents adopt a child who's a family member, they might choose not to call themselves parents, even though they do all the things that parents do.
Yeah.
And this is something that we have no problem accepting in this context. But it's something we have so much of an issue accepting in the context of gender.
And I think too, a lot of that has to do with the concept of suppression. We as a country, I mean, world, but I'm not that worldly, so I'm going to keep it to the US. We as a country have built on the concept that unless you are a white man, and I'm going to put a clarification to that in a second, but unless you are a white man, one of the most important things you can do is suppress anything that goes against what a white man tells you to do. Now, white men, because of the religious faction that we have in this country, have also been told to suppress certain things. But they've been given guidance that if they can't suppress it, it's actually not their fault. It's some other resource, like it's the way a woman dresses, the way if a woman has long hair or shows her hair, right? So they're given outs. And we see time and time again how these great men, these powerful men, these men that have been given authority and autonomy, we've seen them not suppress and do bad things. And what we also know in the medical world, whether we're talking about physical or psychological health, suppression is the number one thing that causes us to be unhealthy.
Absolutely. And when you look at what people use to exclude trans people from gendered spaces, from the lived experience of their gender, it all comes down to things that people can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like when women try to exclude, when cis women try to exclude trans women from their idea of womanhood, it's always talking about, oh, well, they'll never know what it's like to have a period or to have a child. And I'm like, you are breaking down womanhood to, first of all, childbirth and genitals. And I think it is a absolute disservice to womanhood, but also the entire idea of feminism to break a woman's experience down to just genitalia or the ability to have children. But second of all, what about women who don't have periods? What about cis women who don't have periods, cis women who don't have children or who can't have children? They aren't any less of woman.
Yeah.
And it ultimately sounds like their idea of womanhood is what society imposes upon them, what patriarchy imposes upon them. It's all the negative things that, like, oh, you'll never experience this because being a woman is awful in this society. And like, trans women inherently see womanhood as something joyful that they want to strive towards because it's something that they've been kept out of their whole life. Because as somebody who is assigned male at birth, being feminine is not something that is acceptable. And a lot of women see it as like, oh, this is just another way for men to insert themselves into things that are uniquely women's. And I'm like, no, this is people finding joy in being feminine, people finding joy in womanhood. And I think that is so unique and beautiful. And especially for cis women who've taken their womanhood for granted or taken it as something that has been involuntarily thrust upon them that they have to endure, it turns it on its head and it's like, you know what, this is beautiful and this is why we think it's beautiful. And it may not be exactly, we may not always be in agreement about what makes it beautiful or even that it is beautiful, but I think that there's so much beautiful to find in womanhood. And you have vice versa too. Patriarchy telling trans men that, first of all, oh, you just don't know what you're doing, you need to be protected, and that is inherently rooted in misogyny against people who are assigned female at birth. But also cis men feeling threatened about an idea of masculinity that is non-toxic, that is different than cis masculinity, that might incorporate femininity without being threatened, that might overall encompass a different ideal of masculinity that isn't phallocentric, that isn't toxic. Like,
we saw that this week with Anthony Mackie.
Absolutely.
Right. And this idea that he's like, his words were that the last 20 years that we've seen masculinity, I can't remember his exact wording, but go to the wayside or whatever. And, I made a post and I was like, really? Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime.
And then you have trans men that going up and saying, you know what? Being a man is beautiful and incredible. And ultimately that is fighting back against a lot of ideas of patriarchy from both men and women, because, and they're saying, and this is why, and this is how it doesn't have to fit in this box of what masculinity has to be. This is, I can emote, I can
be vulnerable.
I can take portions of my old life and express femininity in the ways that I want to and still be fully 100% masculine. It's like people say, like, I'm not half Indonesian and half white. I am 100% Indonesian and 100% white. And it's like they say, it's like, I can incorporate these aspects of femininity from my old life that I enjoy, but also still remain 100% masculine, because my idea of masculinity is something that I created. And that's something that is threatening for a lot of toxic masculinity, and something that is threatening for some aspects of feminism as well, to like enjoy masculinity and enjoy masculinity from a male perspective, because a lot of masculinity is automatically thought to be toxic and bad and everything that is and inherently patriarchal, and that's subverting that as well. So it's I think that the trans experience of gender is using the pain that you feel about not fitting in, about feeling like something is deeply wrong with you and with the world, that you can't fit into it, and taking that and saying, you know what, I don't think that this is wrong. This is something that's wrong with me. I don't think this is something that I should feel shame about. And saying, you know what? This is something that I want to find the beauty in, because it is beautiful. I want to find the beauty in something that I have been gatekept from my entire life.
Yeah, and so much of a life, I'm going to say an examined life, is finding where you fit, finding your peace, finding what you can contribute to, your purpose, your passion, all of these things. And it is about pushing away what other people say and embracing how you feel. And we, as human beings, inherently have both chromosomes, if you will, into our body. And so we do have a quote unquote masculine and feminine side. And we as individuals get to choose how we embrace both of those sides to build the person that we are, that is unique and beautiful and wonderful, right? And whether you are trans or cis, you're choosing that.
Oh, and I said I wasn't going to talk about biology, but I'm going to talk about it.
Please do. Please do.
Do you know what our chromosomes do in our body?
I don't want to answer that because I know you're going to give me a good answer. So I'm going to say no.
Okay. Essentially, what the Y chromosome does in people who are assigned male at birth is activate a certain expression of a gene that causes the body to produce more testosterone and less estrogen. That's it. We have all of these genes within us that can theoretically express themselves in a more masculine way or a more feminine way, depending on the balance of hormones we have in our bodies. Nowadays, we have the technology to change the hormones that we put in our body and change the expressions of the genes that we already have within us. We have a masculine self inside of us, and we have a feminine self inside of us. Every single man has encoded in their DNA a genetic cup size that they will never know what it is unless they change the balance of the hormones in their body. And that's how the human body works. And we don't know what chromosomes we have unless we have them tested. I have heard so many stories of biology teachers that have said, you know what, I have stopped doing chromosome testing in my biology lab because about 1 in 10, 1 in 20 people end up finding out that their chromosomes are not what they thought they were. And that is not, and at 9 a.m. biology lab is not exactly the time you want to be finding that out.
Well, and our hormones, like you said, there's so much we can do with hormones right now. And hormone therapy got such a bad rap, right, in the early 2000s because of a study that came out that was actually never peer reviewed. It was never looked into what the actual effects were. There were all these baseline issues. And now we're seeing, hold on, we picked up a media story on how bad this is when we could have been helping so many people. Now, a large portion of that is related to women and menopause and hormone changes, but it is also men and how hormones can be beneficial to them, especially as we age.
Ultimately, people by human nature really love dichotomies. They love things to be either this or this, black or white. And that's not the truth. That's not true at all. People aren't either tall or short. You have people who are 5'1", 5'2", 5'3", every single possible height. And when you get in the middle, it becomes really hard to say, well, are you tall or are you short? Because they're in the middle.
It's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum. And every dichotomy is a spectrum. I'm reminded of the story of Diogenes, which is the founder of the skeptic school of philosophy in ancient Greece. And he was a student of Plato. When he asked Plato, what is a man? And Plato said, it's a thing with 2 legs and no feathers. And later in the day, Diogenes brought him a plucked chicken and said, look, a man.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me laugh every single time I think about it, because it is impossible to categorize a thing, anything, fully by a definition that does not inherently exclude some of those, something like portions of things that would fit in that category, that everyone would agree fit in that category. If you say a horse is an animal with 4 legs and a mane that people like to ride, then you go, okay, this is a donkey. It has 4 legs and a mane, people like to ride it. Yeah. Or this is a horse that has 3 legs. Is this not a horse?
And I love that you mentioned that story, because we talked about it in the pre-interview, but also everything evolves. Mm-hmm. So yes, we needed a box in caveman days because our lives were constantly in danger, and we had to, at the snap of a finger, assess if something was dangerous or not. We have evolved as human. That threat is not the same, or yes, it's not the same, but I just want to say it's different, right? Yeah. We still have threats. We still have to take our lessons, our life learnings, and determine what's a threat or not, right? Yeah. But we do it biologically, we do it intellectually, we do it psychologically. We have all these different tools that weren't available to us then, because the brain has evolved, the genetics have evolved, we as humans and our experience have evolved. And evolution is at the heart of that. Mm-hmm. So if we keep our definitions the same all of the time without evolving them, we as a species don't evolve and we become extinct.
Absolutely. And I think you see this even in modern internet culture. When I was growing up, the big thing that everyone would argue about online is a hot dog a sandwich?
I do remember that.
Yeah. And people are like, of course it's not a sandwich. It's a hot dog. It's a different thing. And somebody's like, well, is like a sub, is that a sandwich? Because that is stuff in between one piece of bread that is connected.
Yeah.
That is theoretically the same as a hot dog.
Yeah.
But that is a sandwich. People think that is a sandwich. So why is a hot dog any different? And it ultimately comes down to everyone has a different definition of something, and there's no universal definition of almost anything.
Yes.
And so when bringing this back to gender, I think that it's so hard to define anything for what it is, because categories are so broad and there's always exceptions.
Yeah.
And I think that leads back to the bad faith question that people always ask, which is, what is a woman? Mm-hmm. And they're not asking that in good faith. They're asking that trying to exclude people from womanhood. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the only answer that is going to encompass every single woman in the world is going to be, a woman is someone who says that she is. Mm-hmm. And that's all you need, because the shared experience of womanhood is being treated as a woman, walking through the world as a woman. And if you say that you are, and if you accept the burdens and the joys of womanhood that half the world shares in, then that is something that you are.
I love that, because it also has so many layers, right? Because when a woman tells you something, believe her in all aspects of life. But that should be humans. Unfortunately, as humans, we lie, and there's all sorts of components to that. But when people are talking about their own human experience, it's theirs. Mm-hmm. And who are we to question or to ask someone to legitimize their standing and their authenticity in the world? Mm. So as we start to wrap up, I talk a lot. And so I always want to make sure that I give the guests the last kind of thing. And it can be what you hope people get from this. It could be one thing you wish people knew. It could just be something you think we didn't talk about, but you wish we did.
Ooh, I think my main thing would be asking listeners, when was the first time that you knew that you were your gender? And when was the first time that you were told that you could or couldn't do something because of your gender, and that you questioned it? And I think that everyone has a time that they knew that they were their gender, or that they were told they could or couldn't do something because of their gender. And they kind of go along with it because for most people, their gender is what they were assigned at birth. But everyone has an experience, whether it's girls don't play baseball or boys don't cry, where their gender is, they're told that they can or can't do something because of their gender, and or that they realized what their gender was. And for trans people, that is liminal. It is essential to our sense of self. But for cis people, it's something that is often not thought about. So I would love for people to say, like, hey, like, think about when you knew that you were your gender, and if you think that somebody else might know that better than you, or if you're the one who knew it best.
So I don't typically give homework on this show, which is going to be weird, but I think I love this. And weirdly, I also think that women will identify more than men.
Absolutely.
Because they're not often told what they can. I mean, there's crying and there's things like that. But as a listener, I think it'd be really cool to do like a journal or a writing exercise where that's the question you pose. Because it's one thing to realize your gender and then move on, which a cis person likely would. It's another to add the second question. And that is when you were told you could or couldn't do something related to your gender. And in that writing exercise, how did that make you feel? Did it make you retreat? Did it make you move forward? Did it push you in any sort of way? And that is where that humanity and that empathy can come from, is taking your own experience of that, because no one likes to be told what they can and can't do.
Oh, yeah. And this is going to be something that, like, women listeners are almost certainly going to relate to more than men, because ultimately what patriarchy says about society is that there are two genders, men and political.
Yes.
There are two races, white and political.
Yeah.
There are two socioeconomic statuses, rich and political. Like, ultimately, anything that disturbs the status quo is seen as political. And so for men, realizing your gender, for a lot of the time, is just seeing how you fit in the status quo or how you learn to fit in the status quo. And for women, it's, wait, I can't do this because I'm a girl? That's such bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's entirely different experience of realizing what your gender is, what your experience of it is, and how you fit in the world.
And I want to encourage, if you're a man, boy, teen, I don't know, listening, to also do it though, because, with the show Adolescence that just came out, and if you haven't watched it, please watch it. I think it's a really important piece of art, but it talks about incel culture and male anger and aggression. And think about who benefits from that. Who benefits from you staying angry and placing that blame on other people rather than figuring out how to solve what's making you angry. And so I think even this exercise of writing that down, as a guy, you might say, well, I was told I couldn't cry. Okay, well, what did that then end up doing? How did it benefit you and how did it benefit other people? Because now you're suppressing emotions and feelings, and that is going to manifest throughout your life in different ways. So is it easy for you to communicate with people? Are you getting your needs met? A friend and I talk about how at this age, I'm a lot older than you, but at this age, what we have noticed is we have a lot healthier and lifestyle than the men that are our age, because we have community, and community is so crucial, and they are not allowed to have community because of that lack of vulnerability. So using an exercise like this to write it out, burn it afterwards if you don't want anybody to see it, I don't care, but really getting to the heart of why are these things built? Why are these structures built? They're not built for our benefit. And once you start looking at it through your own lens, you are then able to express more empathy towards other people, because the experience is not all that different.
Yeah. And patriarchy ultimately negatively affects us all. I mean, the rise of, the male loneliness epidemic and the incel culture movement and the Joe Rogans and the Jordan Petersons of the world is because of people who are trying to figure out their own identity as a man in this new world, and the fact that they don't fit in perfectly with what society tells them what a man should be. And I think that's really valuable to realize, because everyone has their own idea of what their gender should be and what it is. And these movements are ways for the young men to try to figure out their own experience with their own gender.
Yeah.
And it is really difficult, but it is something that we don't think enough about just at societally, about why men can and can't do things, why women can and can't do things, and what your own gender is compared to what society says it should be.
Yeah, I really get fascinated. I watch a lot of religion and cult documentaries. And one of the things that fascinates me the most is when men turn away from it, because it is a much different process.
Yeah.
It happens much later. And their realization that the first realization is the women and the children that it harmed. But as they go through the healing process, you start to see them realizing how much of their own identity and their own experience was tainted by these beliefs or these tenets that were given to them and acted out in ways that they actually never agreed in, but they were preyed upon.
Yeah.
And I think, again, clearly I'm very dark and watch a lot of dark content, but for me, it's all this psychological understanding. Why do people do what they do? At the end of the day, people do what they do because they were hurt, they were suppressed, or they were, for lack of a better word, brainwashed into believing they are something or should be something that they're not.
Absolutely.
Once we move away from that kind of culture, we take the boxes away and say, who are you? Be you, boo. And the only caveat is that you are not hurting. I'm going to change that. You are not intentionally hurting other people to be you.
Absolutely. And one of the main things that we value as American culture is that you can be yourself up to the point where you start affecting other people. And like, your freedom to be yourself is 100%, but your freedom to swing your fist stops at my face. But ultimately, what some people don't realize is that you are not free to experience the world without other people. You have the freedom to use a bathroom. You don't have a freedom to use a bathroom without Black people in it. You know, you are not, your freedom does not mean you can exclude other people from public life. And some people want to. Some people want to make sure that they only can use the bathroom in perfect, serene peace. And like, that's not how the world works. That's not how living in a society works.
Yeah. I know you won't know the answer to I mean, if you do, I'm going to be so impressed. But I wonder if people that feel that way, if they're like, I'm not sharing a bathroom with someone who's trans, I'm not sharing a bathroom with someone who's Black, there's hate underneath that. And by the way, there's a difference between ignorance, hate, and ignorance together. And I can understand that. But I wonder if they think they hate.
I don't think so. I think that they're told that you know, trans people are a threat, Black people are a threat, gay people are a threat in a bathroom, that they're just there to prey on people. I just want to be able to pee in public. I have diabetes. I need to pee all the time. And I think a lot of this, especially for trans people, is people expecting that if they see a trans person in the bathroom, they'll know. They'll be able to see a trans person and go, oh, you're a man using this bathroom. Like, I guarantee you that most of these transphobes have used just a bathroom at the same time as a trans person and have no idea that it happened.
And it's also like, who cares? There's so many, like, it's so ridiculous.
And they don't have scanners at the front door to these bathrooms.
But we use a bathroom with each other at home.
Yeah, you don't have to scan your license to get into a bathroom. If a man wants to sexually assault a woman in a bathroom, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
The sign on the door is not going to stop him.
And let's also, for edification, because there's a lot of people that see this bathroom issue for me is just such a distraction, in my personal opinion. But the base for that argument is safety of women. I'm good. My apex predator is a man. It is not a trans person.
Yep.
It's not.
But you see all these people say, I don't want men in women's bathrooms. I don't want men in women's sports.
Yeah.
They don't see them as different people. They see as trans people as fundamentally as men trying to fool people that they are women. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there have been more Republican politicians arrested for lewd behavior in bathrooms than there have been trans people.
Preach to that. I love that. That's how we're going to end the episode. I think that's really great. Sorry, guys. You are working with the Equal Rights Campaign.
Yes.
And so before we leave, I just thought it would be really nice to give a little plug for that because we've still got time as it leads up to. And so we can kind of talk about what that is and where people could get information.
Yes, thank you so much. So the Equal Rights for All campaign essentially is a ballot measure campaign aiming to change the Oregon Constitution to take out language that we voted in there in 2006 to say that marriage is only between one man and one woman, and to add non-discrimination protections built into the Constitution for gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy status, pregnancy ability, and sexuality. So it is saying that you are not allowed to discriminate against a person no matter how they identify, how they show they identify, based on them being pregnant or their ability to potentially get pregnant, or based on who they love.
Yeah.
It's basically saying, in Oregon, we value the ability to let everyone be themselves, and you are not allowed to discriminate against people who are just being themselves.
And I want to put one edification on, well, there'll be two, but one is read these bills very carefully because you may see something in there and say, oh, I don't know, and then be skipping all the things that are important to you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. And then in addition, this is a campaign in Oregon, but you should, if you're listening from somewhere else, you should go and look at the state legislature's website and see what bills are on the ballot or about to be on the ballot or are trying to get on the ballot, yes. Right? We are collecting signatures for the equal rights here in Oregon so that we can be on the ballot, but really get involved on a local level because there's a lot of crap going on in the world right now. And some of it you think affects you and some of it doesn't, but it all impacts you. I don't care what you think. Yeah. So find the things you care about, go look them up and get involved on a local level because you cannot, I'm going to say something really crass. If you are not doing anything about it, shut the fuck up. Get off social media, get off the websites, stop doing it. And it doesn't mean you have to be on the picket lines every day. There are small, medium, and large ways to get involved. Just get involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get this on the ballot in 2026. We're going to need 160,000 signatures to get there. We're going to need to collect in the next 15 months.
Yep.
And we are going to change the Constitution for the better. If you're interested in knowing more, volunteering with the campaign, learning more about what the ballot measure is in the text, the amendment is very short. I guarantee it. It's not going to be so long that people can't understand it. It's less than half a page. Just go to equalrightsoregon.com and you can find out anything you want to know.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right. Wait, Hold Up What is brought to you by the women at Eliminate Girl Hate. We are edited and mixed by the good people at Epiphany Recording Studio. Make sure to subscribe to get notified of new episodes and support our program. To learn more about the work we are doing, get resources to help you and or your business, please visit us at eliminategirlhate.com. And, of course, don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us at Instagram at wait.holdup.what and eliminate_girl_hate. As always, your support means everything to us, and it is the way that we can continue to make positive and uplifting program that supports women and girls around the world. Thank you. We are sponsored by Epiphany Recording Studio. Creativity needs to flow freely if you want to reach that aha moment that we're all looking for. At Epiphany Recording Studio, their goal is to create space that takes full advantage of those moments. From podcast and video production to music creation, you get the support you need to create compelling stories with a competitive sound. Your ideas can flow freely because they partner with you free of judgment, ready to be vulnerable, do the work, and make your projects look and sound their best. So let Epiphany Recording Studio help you reach your artistic vision by visiting them today at epiphanyrecordingstudio.com. Tell them Dawne sent you. Did you know that 80% of the world's purchases are influenced and made by women? Or that 90% of product development, manufacturing, and corporate leadership is led by men? I don't know about you, but that seems like some funky, disconnected math. This disconnect means large segments of the population are not getting their needs met because the products being made never even asked us what problems we needed to solve. Instead, companies use a pink it and shrink it philosophy. Not familiar? I bet you are. You know it. Take a man's product, make it smaller, paint it pink, sell it for 25% more. Then, when the products fail, to make a dent in the market or to sell rapidly, they say things like, the market wasn't ready. Or, we were so sure it was going to work, I wonder what happened. And then they move on. I'm here to tell you, the market is most definitely ready. But the market is savvy. And putting some paint and saying it was designed for us is a slap in the face. We have real needs, and we're not settling for anything less than real solutions. If this sounds familiar to you and your business, then it's time to connect with Eliminate Girl Hate. We help businesses understand the lucrative consumer segment of women and how to meet their needs in authentic ways. From problem solving, product creation, marketing, and even human resource practices, we help create safe and equitable spaces for the female segment. And these safe spaces increase profit margins, employee retention, and brand loyalty along the way. It's time to start a revolution and meet your consumers where they are. It's time to eliminate girl hate. Check us out, eliminategirlhate.com, and find out how we can help your business today.